What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. I apologize for my voice today. I'm a little sick, probably from watching this game. Anyways, thanks for clicking on the video. Today I have an overall review of the Raiders' performance against the Chargers. We're going to be going over the positives and negatives on offense, positives and negatives on defense, how Antonio Pierce fared in his first official game as head coach, and also how the coordinators did, so stay tuned for all that. If you guys are enjoying the content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment down below your thoughts on the game and your overall outlook for the rest of the season. Let's get into the video. Let's start with the offense. In terms of the negatives, we'll start with the glaring one. The Raiders were unable to run the football. All offseason, we heard about how the Raiders wanted to run the ball and try to bully the other team, but that just didn't happen. It was quite the opposite, actually. Our interior offensive line couldn't get much push against what I would say is a pretty weak Chargers interior. Names like Morgan Fox and Poona Ford aren't really scaring anyone, so it's pretty disappointing that the Raiders really couldn't find success on the interior. Nnamdi Madubuike and Michael Pierce will be on the interior next week, so it's most definitely not going to get any easier. The Raiders didn't find any success running outside either, but at least the Chargers have better players on the edges of their defense. Continuing with the performance of the offensive line, pass protection wasn't any better. Will Miller doesn't appear to be 100% as he was routinely getting pushed back into the quarterback, and when Minshew would try to step up, Dylan Parham was frequently pushed back into his space as well. I think the O-line will improve as the season goes on, but it was not a good performance for them today. You can't win when you turn the ball over. It's as simple as that, and the Raiders turned the ball over with multiple fumbles, an interception, and a turnover on downs. There was some kind of miscommunication on the Gardner Minshew fumble where he made an attempt to pull the ball down and ended up fumbling. Zamir White fumbled by not carrying the ball correctly in traffic. These are things that cannot happen if you want to win a football game. If the Raiders are going to win games and have success this season, it's going to be through playing strong defense and taking care of the football. There's a balance that is needed though, and although the Raiders turned the ball over, it's even more concerning because they did it while being extremely conservative. Although they weren't seeing any success, the Raiders continued to try to run the ball, and they threw way too many screen and short passes. It makes no sense because when they did decide to throw the football down the field, they saw a lot of success. When you have players like Davante Adams, Jacoby Myers, and Brock Bowers, you need to get the ball to them. I'm not saying the Raiders need to be the most aggressive team in the world, but they need to find some way to get the ball to these playmakers. The Chargers don't have an elite corner on the roster, but this offense made it look like they had three. Last thing for the negatives, it just seemed like the Raiders lacked any kind of creativity on offense. All they could do was run the ball and throw screen passes. This was extremely disappointing because we were holding on to a glimmer of hope that Luke Getsy could actually be better than he was in Chicago. Let's get into some of the positives I saw from this offense. First thing is that Brock Bowers is the real deal. When he actually got a chance, his route running and good hands were on full display. He had a play where he made an outcut on the field and no one was even near him. This kid has the potential to be great, and I can't wait to see how the season goes for him. Luke Getsy and co need to find more ways to get him the ball, especially in space where he can run after the catch. On the same note, I think the Raiders can grow off of what they were able to do in 12 personnel. We heard all offseason about Michael Mayer and Brock Bowers, and I think the Raiders saw some good success with both of them on the field. One of the times where they were actually moving the ball was off 3 straight catches by tight ends. If they can find a way to run the football, then this package would be even better with the play action game. And Michael Mayer really didn't even get going this game. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens next week with these tight ends. Another positive I took away from this game was that Davante Adams still has elite ability to separate and catch the football. As players age, it gets worrisome of when that regression will hit them. Well, it doesn't look like it's going to be this year for Adams, as he was routinely getting open. Although the offensive line didn't always hold up long enough for the ball to get there, and Minshew missed seeing him a few times as well. We'll go over that in a film review possibly sometime this week. Another thing that was common to hear this offseason was that Gardner Minshew was careless throwing into traffic. I didn't think he showed that in this game. His only interception came in garbage time off of a tipped pass. When he was given the opportunity, I thought he stepped up into the pocket and made some good throws. He was also good on third down. I think the offensive performance falls a lot more on the coaching staff and offensive line rather than Gardner Minshew himself. Let's get into some of the negatives on the defensive side of the ball for the Raiders. The most glaring one to me were the big plays that they gave up in the run game. The Raiders were playing extremely aggressive at the line of scrimmage, so all it really took for a big run was for one guy to be out of place and maybe one missed tackle, and that running back was gone. The Raiders need to be sound in their gaps. Divine Diablo had a tough game as he was routinely out of place in the run game. That's just to give an example. It wasn't all him. I don't think the stat line tells the whole story, as the Raiders were pretty stout outside of a few plays. But those few plays along with turnovers were ultimately the deciding factor in this game. Another thing that was disappointing to see was that the Raiders were not getting home whatsoever with a 4-man pass rush. Even Maxx Crosby wasn't getting home. He had 11 one-on-ones with rookie Joe Alt and didn't register a pressure against him. The sacks and pressures that the Raiders were able to get were coming on blitzes, which we'll talk about later. The loss of Malcolm Kuntz seems to be affecting the Raiders already. Hopefully Tyree Wilson is healthy, as he went down with a knee injury as well in this game. If both of those guys are going to miss extended time, the Raiders should look to see what they can do in free agency and trades. I'm not saying there's a superstar out there, but they need another solid player at the position after the injuries they suffered. In terms of the interior, Christian Wilkins was a beast against the run, but wasn't having a whole lot of success in terms of pass rush. Maxx Crosby and Wilkins will definitely get better as the season goes on, and they played a really good offensive line. I don't think there's a ton to be concerned about quite yet. One of the biggest differences in this game was that although both offenses were struggling, the Raiders turned the ball over and the Chargers didn't. Great defenses forced turnovers, and the Raiders need to take the ball away. Trayvon Merrick almost had an interception that could have put the Raiders in great field position. It would have been a really difficult catch, but again, those are the plays that great defenses make, and the Raiders need a great defense to have success this year. Another thing that was disappointing to see was the Raiders' lack of discipline at the end of the game. I'm all for standing up for your teammates, but throwing punches and throwing players on the ground with their face mask could easily get you suspended, especially as a Raider. Let's be honest, and we can't afford to have Maxx Crosby missing any games for us. In terms of the positives, the Raiders' defense is as advertised. I think there's always a little bit of worry about regression year to year, as defense isn't as stable as offense. But bringing back 9 starters was huge for the defense. It seems like they all have a really good grasp of Patrick Graham's scheme, and you don't see a whole lot of blown coverages like we saw in the past with the Raiders. Outside of the few big plays they gave up, Chargers' offense really did absolutely nothing. Patrick Graham also had a great game plan to stop the Chargers in this game, which is really impressive considering it was week 1 and you don't really know what you're going to get. I'm excited to watch this defense play Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry next week to see how they perform. Let's talk about these blitz packages. Patrick Graham went back to his roots in this game. He did not blitz a lot at all since taking over the Raiders defense, who was previously known as a guy who would send pressure. The blitzes were not only creative, but a lot of them were extremely well disguised. A key to a good blitzing team is that the QB and O-line don't actually know when they're blitzing or not. That's been a reason why guys like Brian Flores has had a ton of success in this league. Graham even had success dropping Christian Wilkins into coverage a few times and having a linebacker replace his rush. That creativity was really cool to see, something we haven't seen with coordinators of this defense in the past. The Raiders' defense plays extremely hard, and they play with a ton of energy through all 4 quarters, which is typically a sign of a well-coached team. I also thought we saw some good development in the offseason from guys like Jacorian Bennett, Trayvon Merrick, and even Robert Spillane continuing to develop even though he's a little older. I think players are really understanding this scheme and love that they can make plays and do different creative things in this defense. Lastly, and maybe most importantly, the Raiders' defense was extremely sound and didn't commit penalties. They weren't grabbing receivers or hitting the quarterback late or other dumb things that have costed them games in the past. Again, a sign of a very well coached team on the defensive side of the ball. The defense has the potential to be a great unit this year if they can play like that every week. Lastly, I'll briefly touch on coaching. I thought Antonio Pierce had really poor game management in week 1. He decided early in the game he was going to be aggressive by going for it on 4th down on his own side of the field, which is fine. But then later in the game when he needed a 4th and 1 down 6 at the Chargers 43, he punted the ball. That's strange to me, and it seems like he doesn't have a true philosophy on what he wants to do in those situations as a head coach. I get that the offense wasn't performing well, but you needed a touchdown to win the game anyways, so why not trust them right then and there, rather than trusting them to drive the whole length of the field if your defense gets the stop. The Chargers would score again after the punt and effectively end the game anyways. I'm worried that with the large coaching staff the Raiders have, that there may be too many voices in Antonio Pierce's ear. On a positive note, it appears that Patrick Graham is truly one of the best coaches in the league. His game plan and play calling were almost perfect in week 1, and his timely blitzes, stunts, and overall execution of his defense was truly great to watch. Like I said before, I'm really excited to watch this defense next week. And on the other side, I just thought Luke Getsy was way too conservative. He had success when this offense was throwing the ball down the field, but he seemed to want to pitch and run screen plays that weren't working instead. Hopefully they're able to adjust, but his time in Chicago isn't giving me much hope. Overall, it was a good week 1 defensively and a horrible one offensively, which I think we were kind of expecting. The difference in this game was that the Raiders committed turnovers and the Chargers didn't. When they needed to, the Chargers were able to pop a big play or two, and the Raiders weren't. I'll see you guys later this week for a film review, or if we skip the film review, I'll see you for my Ravens game preview. Lots of content coming, so don't forget to subscribe and comment your thoughts on the game below, and I will see you in the next one.